Welcome to See Crime Stories, true stories of the missing and the pursuit of answers. One dinner receipt, one bridge crossing, and then silence. No 911. No body. Just a gap in time that would come to redefine how Delaware proves a homicide. Thursday, June 27, 1996. And Marie Fahey, 28, wraps a long day at the governor's office in Wilmington. Colleagues place her in good spirits, focused on the next week's calendar. After work, she heads to Philadelphia for dinner. That meal is the final public anchor in her record, reservation, charge slip, staff recall. From there, the timeline narrows to movement across the river, the route back toward Delaware, and a phone that offers no call for help. The missing person intake begins the following morning when family can't reach her. Patrol units conduct a welfare check. Investigators document the apartment as baseline, what's normal in her space, what's out of place. No confirmed signs of a violent struggle. No blood patterns logged. They secure financial and telecom holds, requesting bank and credit activity, paging records, and landline logs typical for the mid-1990s. The first question is not who did it, but where did she last independently surface, and what can be ruled out in the first 24 hours. They map her professional footprint, a scheduling aide with predictable routines, a tight network inside state government, and a private life she kept small. Victimology stays clinical, workload, appointments, transportation habits, known stressors verified by those who saw her last. When friends describe a complicated relationship in the background, detectives note it, but they don't leap. In no body cases, overreach breaks cases. Procedure builds them. Receipts and toll patterns define the evening corridor. In 1996, cell data is limited. There are no modern pings to triangulate. That makes paper durable, the dinner tab, the parking stub, the bridge path. Investigators draft a window of opportunity that spans late evening into the early hours. They log interviews with anyone who intersected her movements, servers, neighbors, co-workers, friends. Each statement is checked for time, distance, and plausibility. The working line is simple. If she intended to be seen the next day, when and why did her world go quiet? By day 2, media interest rises. The public hears missing Aide, not crime scene. That distinction matters. Without a recovered body or a confirmed homicide location, the case proceeds as disappearance with concern for foul play. Inside the squad room, a pattern begins to form around the person last known to be with her at dinner, well-connected, confident, and already shaping his version of the night. The data aligned almost too cleanly. Sometimes that's the problem. Anne's absence is not just a family emergency. In a small capital, it distorts routine. In places like Wilmington, murders aren't just crimes, they tear at the fabric of a quiet community. The question for investigators is whether this is murder at all, or a disappearance that looks like one. That answer will not come from hunches. It will come from the slow assembly of independent strands, financial traces, corroborated statements, and movements no alibi can bend. The second day is paperwork and patience. Detectives don't hunt rumors, they build a profile that can stand up in court. For in Marie Fahey, that starts with records. Her work calendar is copied. Voicemail is logged. Long-distance calls from her apartment line are printed. Bank and credit accounts are frozen for review. In 1996 the tools are limited, but the basics still work: timestamps, signatures, and people who remember where they were. Co-workers described routine. And arrived early, left on time, and carried a pocket notebook that mirrored the governor's master schedule. She didn't miss meetings. She didn't vanish. Investigators compare the week of June 24th against the prior month. No sudden sick days, no unexplained absences, no purchases that suggest a trip. If she planned to go off the grid, the planning left no trace in her accounts. Family gives the personal baseline. Recent calls were short and practical: rides, recipes, weekend plans. No coded goodbyes, no instructions about pets or bills. Friends add another layer. She had been trying to narrow her private circle, reduce drama, keep her job separate from her personal life. The team records these statements without editorial. People change. What matters is whether the change lines up with the night she disappeared. The apartment is treated like a clock, not a crime scene. Mail is dated. The refrigerator shows normal stock for a single professional. Laundry is in cycle, not packed. Nothing there proves a violent event. Nothing proves she planned to leave. That neutrality is useful. It pushes the case toward the last person known to be with her and the window of time after dinner. In no-body investigations, neutrality isn't a dead end. It's a funnel. The dinner companion remains unnamed on paper copies shown to only a few. The person is confident, politically connected, and accustomed to managing narratives. He offers a timeline, where they ate, when they left, what happened next. Detectives take it all down, then try to corroborate or contradict each block with something that doesn't talk: receipts, logs, traffic patterns. The less emotion in the data, the better. Attention turns to movement. Anne's commute habits are mapped by coworkers who park near her and by any garage attendant who might remember her car. Bridge toll habits are noted for late evening. If she returned toward Delaware, there should be a narrow band of time for that crossing. If she didn't, the timeline must reflect why no one saw the car in places she usually left it. The absence of a vehicle in its usual spot is not proof of foul play, it's proof the clock kept running somewhere else. On the employment side, the governor's staff provides the next week's commitments that Anne would never miss without a message. Those entries become anchors. For each appointment, an investigator asks, did she confirm it? Did she send a backup? Did she leave materials that show intent to appear? When the answers trend yes, 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 the probability that she chose to walk away decreases. That kind of math is boring to watch but persuasive to a jury. Financials help. After the dinner charge, there is no midnight ATM withdrawal, no impulse purchase, no gasoline receipt. In a metropolitan corridor, silence like that is rare unless the cards are taken out of service, the cardholder is incapacitated, or someone else is steering the night. The team doesn't say which one it is. They only mark the silence. Friends mention stress over a relationship that felt unequal, gifts, attention, control, then attempts to step back. The notes are careful: who said it, when, and whether they saw messages or only heard retellings. One person's impression is not evidence, 3 independent sources pointing to the same dynamic can be. The case file grows with cautions written in the margins: corroborate, corroborate, corroborate. By the end of this phase, the inner circle is triaged. People with no access are thanked and released. People with opportunity are logged for deeper interviews. One name sits closer to the center because of simple physics: he was with her last. He knows the route. He benefits from a narrative that proceeds without frictions. The data aligned almost too cleanly. Sometimes that's the problem. This is where the work has value beyond a headline. When someone goes missing, the record you leave, calendars kept current, appointments confirmed, a habit of telling friends where you're headed, can shorten the distance between uncertainty and action. In towns like Wilmington, that distance defines how a case survives the first week. The reconstruction starts at the table. Investigators obtain the reservation log, the server's name, the seating chart, and the charge slip with the imprint time. It is Philadelphia on a Thursday in late June 1996, busy but manageable. Staff recall 2 diners, quiet, unremarkable to anyone not paid to notice. The slip provides an anchor, the host log gives a seat time, the server's notes help bracket the duration of service. That gives the case a verified start and end for the meal without relying on anyone's memory alone. From there, the route becomes the work. The restaurant sits within a short drive of the bridge toward Delaware. Detectives map likely exit streets and the most efficient on-ramps at that hour. In 1996, plate readers and ubiquitous cameras don't exist, so the team leans on the kind of documentation that still holds up in court: toll procedures, parking stubs, garage transactions, and witness statements narrowed by time. If a valet ticket exists, they secure it. If a garage attendant remembers a make and color rolling out near closing, they document that: name, contact, and the precise time the gate clock printed. Nothing is dramatic, everything is usable. They also test the companion's account line by line, what time they say the check fell, which exit they used, where they claim the handoff ended. The story is compared against the restaurant's point-of-sale record, the host stand's handwritten edits, and the kitchen's final fire time. A person may misremember. A kitchen printer does not. If the companion's timeline pushes earlier or later than the receipts allow, that discrepancy is marked, not argued. The file grows with neutral conflicts the jury can see. Phone activity is limited. This is a pre-smartphone era. Landline records from the companion's home and Anne's apartment are pulled for the hours after the dinner. If either line shows outgoing calls consistent with the stated timeline, that supports it. If nothing lines up, the gap becomes the point. Bank data is equally quiet. There is no cash withdrawal following the meal, no gas purchase stamped after midnight on the corridor south. Silence does not prove murder. It only proves the night narrowed in places where transactions usually talk. They work the staff again, this time with photos of vehicles of interest, making sure the memory of a server isn't stretched to fit the theory. The line they walk is strict: do not feed details, collect them. A server's reliable recall often involves small service facts, a returned dessert, a comped coffee, a last-minute substitution, details that align with order tickets and reinforce the time window without coaching. One such detail confirms the table lingered briefly after the bill, not long enough to push the departure into a later toll bracket. The corridor home should have been timely. Back across the river, the route logic tightens. Investigators canvass regulars in Anne's building to determine when the lot typically fills and empties on weeknights. If her assigned spot remained empty that night and the next morning, the car may have been moved or not returned at all. They check tow records, they check impound, they check for any report of an abandoned vehicle that matches her make and model. When none of those produce a hit, the inference is restrained but significant. Whatever happened began after the dinner and before normal morning routines, and it likely did not involve a public tow or an obvious breakdown. The timeline is now measured in blocks of 10 minutes. The last course. The settle. The walk out. Did anyone see a goodbye? Did anyone see a split into separate cars? The companion says yes to a clean exit and offers a route. The receipts don't contradict it outright, but they don't support every minute either. That tension is where no body cases live. You can't manufacture a camera frame that never existed. You can, however, refuse to fill the false space with speculation. The cleanest story doesn't always mean the truest one. Detectives test scenario branches. If en road back toward Delaware as a passenger, where is the independent proof, bridge transactions, witnesses at a gas station, or a neighbor hearing a late-night arrival? If she drove separately, where did her car go, and who saw it parked or moved? Each branch is assigned tasks with checkboxes, not adjectives. The work is repetitive on purpose. Repetition is how you prevent error masquerading as certainty. They protect the victim's dignity while acknowledging the gravity. A professional who kept her schedule tight and her obligations met did not reappear for appointments she confirmed. The data says she meant to live her life the next day. That makes the absence after dinner meaningful. It is not sensational. It is a simple line: she intended to be present and wasn't. One more step: a walkthrough at the restaurant at the same day and hour, a week later. The team tracks how long it takes to settle the bill, how quickly you can clear to the street, and how congested the on-ramp feels at that time. They set a stopwatch from door to bridge. The recreation doesn't prove who was in which car, but it tells them how tight the window is for anything unplanned to occur without drawing attention. Tight windows matter. Tight windows are either alibi-friendly or alibi-breaking when you place them against independent records. That is the value of this chapter of the case. The dinner is not a mood, it's a clock. And a clock, once set, narrows the field of what is possible and who benefits from the gaps. In towns like Wilmington, murders aren't just crimes, they tear at the fabric of a quiet community. The job is not to tear it further with guesses. It's to replace guesses with times you can prove. By day 3, the file is heavier but still missing the one thing that ends debate. No remains. No confirmed homicide scene. What changes now is the math. Investigators stack the dinner timestamps against the companion's account and start clocking gaps that can't ride on memory alone. The point of sale time and the host stand seat map put closing activity a few minutes later than he recalls. A kitchen printout fixes the last course. When a version of events requires minutes the restaurant can't give, the case stops being a simple disappearance and becomes a timetable you either meet or you don't. They expand beyond the table. A garage attendant remembers a sedan leaving close to closing, but the description is too broad to identify a specific vehicle. That's fine, timestamps matter more than color. A manager produces the gate clock tape, which prints an exit time bracket that narrows the window for anything after the meal. On the Delaware side, routine checks confirm no impound, no tow, no overnight parking ticket in the victim's usual zones. If she returned in her own car, there should be something mundane that proves it. There isn't. Silence in places that usually generate receipts isn't proof of murder, but it is proof of opportunity. The dinner companion offers a streamlined story. Investigators treat it like evidence, not narration. They request landline logs from his residence for the hour after he says the evening ended. They ask for any pager or home office calls that might back his timeline. The records are thin. Thin isn't guilt, but it makes corroboration harder, and in a no-body case, corroboration is how you move. The team repeats a rule they use even when cameras are scarce: let documents talk before people do. Behavior becomes its own exhibit. When detectives schedule a follow-up, the companion arrives prepared with a complete arc, down to small talk and street turns, as if pre-printed. That polish isn't a crime, but it draws a line under the inconsistencies they've already logged. He positions the night to end earlier than the restaurant can support, then shifts by a few minutes when shown the receipt time. Small changes matter when the window is tight. He knows the system, knows how to keep statements tidy, and knows who to call. Power buys time. It doesn't buy back a clock you can't meet. At the same time, investigators lock down the victim's commitments for the next day and the week ahead: standing meetings, calls she set with colleagues, a routine she honored. People who vanish by choice don't leave that many fixed points in place. The team doesn't speculate about motive, they don't have to. The schedule itself argues against voluntary absence. When you're writing for a jury, ordinary promises kept are stronger than adjectives. The legal posture shifts. The supervising prosecutor authorizes a grand jury track. Subpoenas go out for phone and utility records, storage or rental contracts, and purchase histories that could suggest tools of disposal or concealment. None of that announces a murder, it announces due diligence when a person goes missing after a fixed event. The threshold is not case solved, it's reasonable steps when someone stops appearing where the record says they will. Friends and coworkers are re-interviewed with a narrower lens. What did she say about winding down a relationship? Who knew about the dinner? Did anyone receive a late message signaling a change of plans? Statements are separated by source and time. Where three accounts align on the same attempt to set boundaries, investigators elevate that pattern from rumor to context. Still, restraint rules the notes. Impressions go in one column, corroborated facts go in another. The second column drives charging decisions. Then comes a clean inflection point. A timeline chart on the squad room wall runs from the last course to the likely bridge crossing and forward through the early morning hours. On the companion's version, certain calls should exist: check-ins, home arrivals, anything that happens when a night ends normally. Those records don't materialize. Instead, there is a block of quiet that makes his tidy exit harder to sustain. Gaps alone don't prove homicide. But when the only account that explains the gaps shifts to fit new timestamps, investigators no longer treat this as equal stories. They treat it as a story and a record, and only one of those two things survives cross-checks. The step from missing to suspected foul play isn't ceremonial. It triggers preservation orders, expands search authority, and lets the state prioritize leads that would be overreach in a simple welfare check. The companion is now a formal focus, though his name remains withheld here to preserve the structure of the narrative and avoid prejudicing what comes next. What matters is the sequence: fixed dinner times, a narrow route window, routine obligations she did not keep, and an account that requires minutes the documents don't grant. There's a human layer to this, too. Families live between updates, and communities want certainty fast. In cases like this, speed is the enemy of accuracy. The right move is slow. Test every claim against a source that can't be coached. That's how a nobody case survives the back half, on paper, not performance. The shift to water begins with access. Investigators don't chase rumors of currents or drift. They verify who in the companion's orbit controls a boat, who can launch without attention, and who knows the New Jersey coast well enough to work at night. Paperwork answers first. Registration records point to a vessel tied to a close family member of the dinner companion. Marina contacts confirm typical launch hours and where that boat was kept in the summer of 1996. None of this proves a homicide. It proves opportunity linked to equipment that can move weight far from cameras, streetlights, and neighbors. Inventory becomes the next lane. Buyers and sellers of that same boat, before and after the relevant months, are asked what condition it was in, what gear transferred with the sale, and whether anything stood out. A detail begins to repeat from independent sources: anchors. A standard cabin cruiser carries what you expect: lines, fenders, life vests, 2 anchors. Later paperwork and recollection suggest a mismatch: equipment lists that imply a pair, follow-up checks that can only account for one. Missing gear is not a crime scene, but when the only dependable surface is the ocean, it matters what you throw overboard and what you still have the next day. Parallel to that, detectives pursue the container question. If someone intended to move a body to open water, what common purchase would reduce the chance of discovery? Large coolers are ordinary in coastal states. Brand and model matter when you ask stores about summer stock. Subpoenas go to big box retailers and specialty outfitters within a drive of both the restaurant and the Delaware corridor. Clerks don't remember faces months later, but invoices remember dates and models. The team builds a short list of sizable, rigid coolers sold in the weeks before the disappearance, then looks for buyers who connect back to the companion's circle. The point isn't drama. It's chain, item, date, purchaser, relationship. The route logic tested in the prior phase now stretches to the shore. Detectives map the late-night drive time from Wilmington to common launch points along the New Jersey coast, Brigantine, Atlantic City, farther if someone is willing to burn fuel and hours. They're not claiming the drive happened. They're asking if it could have happened inside the post-dinner window without drawing attention. Gas receipts, toll sequences, and routine police logs for stops along those highways are cross-checked for anything that could place the companion's circle on the move. Mostly, they find silence. In a case like this, silence is not a narrative tool, it's a boundary you can test but not bend. Then there is physics. Boats are allowed at launch sites, but late-night runs blend into normal marina noise in summer. If the vessel tied to the companion's family member left the slip, would anyone note it? Some attendants say yes: loud engines, lights, a face they know. Others admit a truth investigators already understand: past midnight, an ordinary boat looks like every other ordinary boat unless something goes wrong. That is why disposal theories in coastal jurisdictions often survive on paperwork and statements rather than eyewitnesses. The ocean doesn't give you a neat frame. It gives you a probable method and a timeline that either fits or fails when other records surface. All of this would still be a soft lead if it stood alone. It doesn't. A second thread arrives: testimony that someone close to the companion helped procure a handgun and ammunition weeks before the disappearance. The weapon is not recovered, there is no ballistics match, this remains a nobody file. But the overlap matters. When a purchase like that appears in the same window as a large cooler and boat access with missing anchors, investigators stop treating the leads as parallel. They treat them as a bundle. Each piece stays what it is, indirect. Together, they start to explain why the case moves without the very evidence juries expect to see. The recreation work continues. Detectives take a standard cooler of the same make and size out to a training tank, then out on a supervised water test with maritime officers. They document how buoyant it is when empty, what it takes to keep it under, and how punctures change the behavior. No one claims this is the cooler from the case. The footage is not spectacle, it's education for prosecutors and, eventually, jurors. It answers a fair question in a nobody homicide: is what you're alleging plausible without specialized tools or a commercial vessel? The answer, supported by ordinary physics, is yes. You don't need cinematic equipment to hide evidence in salt water. You need time, darkness, and weight. There's a human dimension the file never forgets. Families often ask why search teams don't simply drag the bay. The reality is geography. The coastal shelf is wide, currents shift, the window created by the dinner and the estimated drive still leaves hours of possible water. Dragging without a strong coordinate yields hope more often than results. Telling a family that is difficult, but accuracy is part of respect. In cases like this, what you can show, who had the boat, who lacked anchors after, who bought the container, carries more weight than false certainty on a map. The final act of this phase is administrative, not dramatic. With the ocean theory now supported by ownership records, sale recollections, equipment discrepancies, and the emerging handgun testimony, the supervising prosecutor authorizes additional subpoenas and begins shaping a narrative that explains, step by step, how a murder can be proven without a recovered body. It's not a trick, it's a standard, corroboration over spectacle. When the work is explained cleanly, people understand it, even if they wish it ended with a recovery the family could lay to rest. The file reaches the point where the name can't sit behind black ink anymore. The dinner companion is identified: Thomas J. Capano, Delaware attorney, former prosecutor, a man with access and influence in the same circles where and Marie Fahey worked. The decision to say his name in a courtroom context is not a headline move. It's a legal one. Investigators believe they can show probable cause without a recovered body and without a confirmed homicide scene. The records they've been collecting, timestamps, route logic, missing anchors, large cooler purchases in the relevant window, and thin or shifting explanations, clear the bar to move from interviews to charges. The shift begins with a grand jury path. Prosecutors outline the case as evidence categories rather than story beats: documentary, restaurant POS, host logs, gate tape, opportunity, boat access tied to Capano's family orbit, equipment discrepancies, preparation, a handgun and ammunition obtained weeks before and disappeared, not recovered but attested to under oath, and conduct after the disappearance, account changes that track new timestamps rather than independent memory. Each strand is presented so it can stand alone, with corroboration that does not depend on faith in a single witness. In a nobody homicide, that structure matters more than rhetoric. Capano sits for questioning knowing the terrain. He has practiced answers. He offers early versions of events that end the evening earlier than the documented closeout at the restaurant, then acknowledges a few minutes when presented with the slip time. He describes a routine, uneventful night. He cannot produce the small, ordinary records that would validate that routine in the window that now carries weight. The absence of those records is not guilt, but it sharpens the contrast with Anne's habits. A professional who filled next-day commitments did not show up anywhere she said she would. When investigators name Capano, they also lock down the arrest timeline, late 1997, and freeze the narrative to what can be proved. They do not invent a scene. They do not promise a weapon. They explain to the court why circumstantial evidence is a legitimate path to a murder conviction. Each piece points in the same direction and is supported by independent documents or testimony. A jury is not being asked to guess. It is being asked to evaluate whether the combined weight of verified facts excludes reasonable alternative explanations. The defense posture is predictable: no body, no crime. Prosecutors answer with the same calm they used to build the file. First, the post-dinner window is tight by documents the defense doesn't control. Second, boat access tied to Capano's circle plus missing anchors is not rumor, it's inventory and recollection from people with no incentive to embellish. Third, the handgun purchase weeks before the disappearance, made by someone close to him, aligns with preparation even if the firearm is not recovered. Fourth, post-event conduct. including timeline shifts, supports consciousness of guilt when the shifts track new documents rather than stable memory. No one claims these are direct proofs. The state claims they are convergent and reliable. To keep the case clean, investigators continue to separate what they know from what they suspect. They know Capano was with and at dinner on June 27, 1996. They know the time the bill closed and the reasonable travel time that follows. They know her routines, and they know she failed to meet them without explanation. They know the threads, boat, anchors, cooler, firearm testimony, sit inside the same season and the same social orbit. What they suspect is the disposal method. What they will never do is pretend they found what they didn't. That discipline preserves credibility for the stages to come. Naming the suspect also shifts the community lens. This isn't a shadow figure anymore. It's a known attorney in a small place where government, law, and daily life intersect. People who admired Anne's work in the governor's office now match that public service against the possibility that someone in her proximity used status to gain time and advantage. The case has always been about a missing woman and a clock. With a name on it, it is also about accountability where connections run deep. For families watching, there's a difficult truth we try to say plainly: a case without a body can still be a strong case when the documents don't bend and the witnesses align where they can be checked. The goal in court will be the same as it's been since day one: show the timeline, show the tools, show the conduct, and let the weight of those facts meet the standard the law requires. Once the name is public, the case moves from paper to people. Prosecutors start with witnesses who can place tools and access in the same orbit as Thomas J. Capano and Marie Fahy's disappearance. They don't ask for stories, they ask for facts that can be checked. Under oath, a woman close to Capano acknowledges providing a small-caliber handgun and ammunition weeks before June 27, 1996. She describes why she trusted the request, how the transfer happened, and when she realized the timing now mattered. The weapon is never recovered, but her account is specific on make, caliber, and date. Phone records show contact around the time she says the handoff occurred. That is how circumstantial evidence gets weight, when details line up with something you can pull from an archive. Family becomes the second pillar. A relative with control over a boat confirms routine summer access and the kind of equipment that stayed on board: lines, fenders, life jackets, 2 anchors as standard. He can account for only 1 anchor later. He also remembers a large, rigid cooler in the relevant period and cannot place it after the disappearance. The testimony is uncomfortable, but it is clean: what was there before, and what wasn't there after. No speculation, just inventory turning into timeline. Prosecutors connect those sworn statements to the route logic already in the file. The point-of-sale clock at the restaurant still fixes the meal. The gate tape still brackets departure. The absence of normal end-of-night calls still leaves a dead space where a routine should appear. Now the testimony fills the gap with access and preparation: a handgun sourced in advance, a boat that could move weight offshore, gear that should be present but isn't. Nothing contradicts the earlier record. Everything narrows it. On cross-examination, the defense leans into motive and memory. Why believe a witness who once cared for the defendant? Why trust a relative who wants distance from a scandal? The answer is the same one the case has used since day one: because the pieces that can be verified are verified. The dates of phone calls surrounding the gun transfer exist. The boat's registration, slip location, and typical gear are documented. Even where memory could be soft, the anchors and cooler problem doesn't rely on perfect recall, it relies on what's missing when you audit later. Jurors also hear about conduct after the disappearance. Timeline shifts are placed side by side, showing how Capano's versions bend toward whichever timestamps can't be ignored. No speeches, no adjectives, just earlier statements next to receipts and logs. A pattern becomes visible without a narrator telling the jury what to think. When records surface, the story adjusts. When records are thin, the story is precise. That asymmetry is not proof by itself, but it is the context that makes the sworn statements hit harder. The state keeps faith with the no-body reality. They do not promise a recovery they never had. Instead, they show why a recovery may be impossible if a body was taken to open water with weight sufficient to defeat buoyancy. The earlier tank and water tests are now a few quiet photos and a slide deck method, not spectacle, to answer whether the disposal theory is physically plausible. Jurors are asked to consider plausibility in light of access, timing, and missing gear, not to imagine scenes the state can't prove. There is a human line that doesn't get lost in the exhibits. And was a disciplined public servant who set her next day appointments and didn't make them. Families watching need an honest accounting more than dramatic closure. That means crediting any witness who tells the truth, even if their earlier ties to the defendant complicate how they will be seen. Accountability in a nobody case is built that way, one careful, corroborated admission at a time. In court, the state keeps it tight. No body. No recovered weapon. Just fixed records and sworn statements that line up without leaning on anyone's memory. Restaurant POS and host logs lock the night of June 27, 1996. Travel time limits the window. Phone activity that should mark a normal end to the evening isn't there. Testimony adds preparation and access, a handgun obtained weeks before the disappearance, a family boat available that summer, anchors expected to be 2, later only 1 accounted for, a large rigid cooler seen, later unplaced. Each piece is modest alone, together they point in one direction and never contradict the paperwork. The defense argues absence, no body, no crime. Prosecutors answer with convergence. The case is built so jurors can check every critical fact against something that does not change: receipts, registrations, call logs, marina records. When prior statements by Thomas J. Capano are compared to timestamps, the pattern is plain. The story adjusts when documents surface, not before. Jurors are told what the law requires in Delaware: proof beyond a reasonable doubt, not a recovered victim, and why circumstantial evidence qualifies when independent sources agree. On January 17, 1999, the jury returns a guilty verdict for murder. Sentencing initially sets death, but years of appellate review reshape the penalty. In 2006, the death sentence is vacated. Capano is resentenced to life without the possibility of parole. The conviction stands. In 2011, he dies in prison. There is no recovery to return to the family. There is accountability established by evidence that could be verified when little else could. This result mattered beyond one file. Delaware confirmed a path to a no-body conviction that other jurisdictions cite: start with what cannot be coached, separate knowns from theories, and resist the urge to fill gaps with imagination. It also leaves a human lesson that doesn't blame victims: ordinary structure, appointments kept, messages confirmed, small records left behind, helps close time gaps when someone goes missing. Communities can support that with better records retention and careful handling of witnesses who step forward even when it is difficult. And Marie Fahy's life was defined by discipline and public service. The case that followed her disappearance was defined by discipline too: a clock that would not bend, access that could not be ignored, testimony that could be checked. It isn't a cinematic ending, but it is a truthful one, and sometimes that is the most a courtroom can offer. I'll leave you with this: in real life, safety is built from small, checkable habits: texts sent, plans kept, boundaries set out loud. Anne's routine helped reveal the truth: our routines can protect us and one another. What would you change tomorrow? Your check-ins, your routes, your circle, so someone could find you if needed. Do you agree the law can prove a murder without a body when records converge? Share your take, tell me where you're watching from, or why this didn't work for you. If this story moved you, please subscribe to the channel to follow the next cases.